So, Meg, thank you for joining us. I think your art made the kit come alive. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your work as an artist?
Yeah, sure. I guess first, thank you for having me and thank you for saying that. That's very nice. So I'm a comic artist, as you might have guessed by looking at the comics I made. And I usually do autobiographical work. So I'm also a Korean adoptee, and a lot of my work has tended to focus on that and other contextual stuff to do with that, like things to do with adoption or Korean history, that kind of thing. I was initially attracted to comics because I came across it during an animation degree. I had to just do like a one semester kind of compulsory class on comics, but I realized I liked them a lot more than animation because they were really good at being able to make complex or occasionally difficult things more digestible and accessible.
Yeah.
I think that's why they're helpful for a lot of stuff.
Look, Meg, in working with you and looking at the art you've created, I mean, I'll put a few of these images up on the screen, but your work is really relatable to anyone that's rented. Do you have a background as a renter yourself?
Yeah, I definitely do. I've been renting since I was 21, so it's like 15 years or something.
I'm thinking of that image where you've got two housemates sitting on the couch and one of the housemates comes in and says, "Hey, I'm going to contact the real estate agency." It just feels like that's a scene that we've all seen if we've ever lived in a share house.
Yeah, that was definitely based on my own share house experience. I live just with my partner now, but before that, it was all share houses. When I began renting, I kind of fell into it. The first place I lived in out of home was not exactly legal, but we ended up being able to rent it. Rents have skyrocketed since I first moved out of home, and that's something I don't think I would have been able to do today with like the same kind of employment circumstances and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I I was yeah, I was thinking back a lot on, like, the various housing experiences I've had while making those comics. Quite a few people I know who have been living just with one partner or, like, by themselves recently have had to go back into share houses.
When you were starting off as a renter, when you were having that experience in the home that probably wasn't up to the levels that you'd expect, what were some of the things that you encountered?
I think one of my main takeaways from that experience was first, like, learning the legal requirements on what an actual habitable home should be like. So the building we were in had a giant hole in the floor that we were keeping a 3 millimeter sheet of
Oh, no.
MDF over. And at one point the roof fell in. So we'd begun to be able to rent it through a very confusing process in negotiation. That was one of my first interactions with a real estate agent, and she she wasn't happy. You know, my partner who I was living there at the time got an outright abusive phone call for her where she accused us of being peasants and
Wow.
that kind of thing. So that broke a lot of my illusions about how protected you might be as a renter, or like how much you'd have to advocate for yourself or find people who will be able to advocate on your behalf in the kind of standard renter landlord real estate agent relationship. I found this horrible crumbling house at the time a fun adventure, but looking back on it now and also just learning what a habitable home should be like, because I really had no idea going into it. I just realize now how far it fell short of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how important it is to like be aware of what you should expect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we approached you about this project, which is for new renters or people that haven't had experience renting in New South Wales, what was it that made you say yes? Like what attracted you to this content?
I think stuff like that. I think remembering how little I knew when I was starting out renting, and how I wouldn't have known so much that I picked up if it hadn't been for like weird coincidences or just like having a one-off conversation with a friend when we were complaining about our houses or something.
Mm.
So I think like, having a resource that's accessible and consolidates a lot of stuff would have been super helpful and super important. And even now, as I was reading through some of the content, I was like, oh, I didn't actually know that. And especially since the rental market's so much more competitive now, the stakes are a lot higher in terms of being able to protect yourself and
Oh,
know what's necessary. Yeah.
yeah. It was already a struggle for a lot of people to get their foot in the door.
Yeah.
And now that just seems even harder for people. So
Yeah.
so when we started talking about these ideas, you hadn't actually seen the content of the kit, had you? We were just talking broadly about the ideas and what some of the scenes might show. What was your process for creating those comic panels?
You sent through like a quite comprehensive script that suggested the content for each panel and the dialogue or text that there needed to be. So I think one of the first things I did for that was break it down into smaller chunks because I'm a person with a short attention span a lot of the time and like often things will just bounce off the outside of my brain unless like they're broken down into chunks. And just based on the things that you'd suggested, fleshing out the scenarios and what particular scenes I could show to go with what chunks of information.
Mm.
Then from there, just thinking of the different sorts of renters I could portray because, ideally it's a resource that could resonate with as many people's personal experience as possible.
Yeah.
And also like thinking back on the experiences I'd had and like the things I see around my neighborhood, just to put little bits in there that will hopefully make the environments and the scenarios seem familiar enough to people so they can relate to a little bit,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Well, from my point of view, I think you've nailed that. We had a bit of a back and forth about one of the characters, I remember. It was the character of the tenants advocate. Um, and we are talking about who should play this really important role.
Yeah.
I think I remember the first version was a huntsman, which
Yes.
was actually, I loved that idea, but we decided not to go with it. How talk about that kind of process of finding the voice of the tenant's advocate or the information source in this piece?
Yeah, I've forgotten about the huntsman until this morning, actually. But yeah, I think fairly early on when you sent through that script, there'd been a suggestion of maybe for the information coming from the tenant's advocate to have maybe a renter's pet or something similar. I personally have only lived in one house that could have a pet in it. And I know, like, whether you're a dog or a cat person can be very divisive and that kind of stuff. So I began thinking about things that people might find in their homes anyway. I think huntsmen are very cute. They're definitely inside many, many homes.
They're very helpful.
They are also
Yeah.
very helpful. Yeah, exactly. And they can be in any room of your house.
Yeah.
Um, But yeah, I do also understand that spiders can be a bit divisive. I settled on birds because most people tend to feel at least all right about birds, but also they're a familiar element of the urban landscape and they can also pop in anywhere if you've got a window, I guess.
They also let you play with some really interesting perspective in your art, which I think is beautiful and it adds an element to the whole thing. So you're talking about capturing this, I don't know, this feeling of being in the urban landscape or suburban landscape. Was there anything in particular you did to capture that mood or capturing the vibe of the kid?
I think something in general I do with my work is just putting in enough small and specific details, something familiar that someone looking at it can attach themselves to. If I was walking around, like, I'd pay attention to the brickwork of buildings I was seeing and, I looked at a few real estate photos and that kind of thing to remember weird architectural features that standard houses and properties might have. Yeah, I think think that's it. So like that's my secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you reckon would be the benefits of something like a comic to get across information rather than just text?
I think just in general, comics have a very good way of saying a lot of things in quite a condensed way. And you can show a lot of things in the space of like a very small portion of a page, and you can give a person a sense of something. And I think also like comics tend to be a very accessible medium as well. The general aesthetic is something that's kind of friendly and inviting and unassuming. So it's like getting a tasty fortune cookie that has information in it or
Love it.
something.
Love it. And that
Yeah.
kind of makes me want a tasty fortune cookie with like a tenancy fact or something.
Yeah.
um,
I think I'm also hungry right now.
do you have a favorite panel from the work that you did with us?
Yeah, I think wait, the one with the family?
Yeah, moving out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. I think maybe the final panel of that was the nicest. The nicest. The one I liked the most. I yeah, I think maybe that was one of the more content heavy comics. So just by virtue of that, I had to work with this family that I'd created for a little bit longer and stay with them a little bit longer. I think just the fact that the final panel kind of shows the end of this like relationship this little girl's had with this Laura Key that's kind of been like this secondary narrative to what's been going on.
Did you take anything away from the work? Like, is there anything that you learned or something that's kind of shifted your perspective?
It's kind of been the first comic work I've done where I feel like I've had to depict a broad range of people. Since I normally do autobiographical work, I'm just drawing myself a lot, and I often feel very okay just making myself looking like just weird and sweaty and whatever, and portraying myself in like quite unflattering ways, but really wanting to draw people kind of accurately and respectfully. Just they could be characters people might possibly relate to. That was actually a bit of a challenge.
Want to take the humor out of it?
Yeah. And also just thinking about like who I was depicting as well. Cause I think there was some discussion around that early on, just kind of wanting to depict the diversity of renters in New South Wales. Being able to have done that to some degree of success has felt like very fulfilling and hopefully like does what it's set out to do. Cause again, I feel like it's a really good resource and I wish I'd had it like 10 years ago.
Yeah. No, I think it is too, and it's made better for your work.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for inviting me. Like, I'm sure the content will help a bunch of people, but like, I hope the comics have added to it.